Snow whispered beneath his boots. Then he saw it. A red tail vanishing into the brush and a woman's voice asking, "Are you a hunter?" Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy long-form human excellent and foxgirl romance stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a tale. Now let's begin. The wilderness stretched endless in every direction, hushed beneath a ceiling of gray clouds and drifting snow. Derek was used to the silence. He lived for it, moving with the seasons, eating what the land gave, sleeping beneath stars no city light could drown. But in that lonely stillness, he found something he never expected. Another traveler, not human, not beast, but both, and she had already scented him long before he laid eyes on her. Derek pushed through the snow-laden pines, his cloak heavy with frost. The forest smelled alive. Pine sap, wet bark, smoke faint on the wind. He slowed at once, nostrils flaring. Smoke, fresh. Someone had camped here, and not long ago. He followed the scent and the faint scuff marks in the snow until he found it. A small camp tucked into a sheltered dip between boulders. The fire was only embers now, ringed with stones. A fur-lined bedroll was half-folded, leaning against the log. A bundle of gathered wood leaned nearby. Whoever it was, they couldn't be far. Derek crouched, brushing his hand across the bedroll. Still warm, he frowned. Strange, he muttered under his breath. Most folks packed tighter than this. It wasn't the first time he'd stumbled on a campsite. Sometimes hunters left them. Sometimes travelers abandoned them in a hurry. Usually there were signs, ashes gone cold, tracks leading away, but this one felt alive, a little too recent. He bent near the fire pit, poking at the charred wood. Couple hours, maybe less, he guessed. They'll be back soon. Something moved at the corner of his eye, a flash of red slipping through the brush. His instincts read fox. Derek chuckled, straightening. "Oops," he said, a loud voice warm, as if to reassure the animal. "Didn't mean to scare you, little guy." But the answer that came wasn't the rustle of leaves. "Are you a hunter?" The voice was feminine, clear. Derek froze. The hairs on his arms prickled. Slowly, he turned, scanning the brush where he'd glimpsed the red flash. "You," he stammered. Rough voice, unsteady for the first time in weeks. "No, I'm just passing through." The undergrowth parted. A figure stepped out. Not a fox. Not quite. A woman, though not wholly human. Her hair was a cascade of flame, wild against the pale backdrop of snow. Fox ears twitched atop her head for dusted with white flakes. A thick tail swayed behind her, red-orange tipped with white. She wore layers of patchwork leathers and furs, light enough to travel in, but warm against the cold. Her golden eyes studied him with suspicion, narrowed and sharp. "Then why?" she asked evenly. "Are you going through my things, human?" Derek blinked, glancing at the bedroll he touched. He raised his hands, palms out. "Fair point," he said with a disarming smile. "Sorry, thought the camp was abandoned. Didn't mean to poke where I shouldn't." He stood slowly, stepping back from the fire. "Didn't realize you were here the whole time." "I was," she said simply. Her ears twitched again. "I could smell you coming." That startled him enough to laugh, the sound rolling out like a bark. "Smell me? Guess it's been longer than I thought since my last bath." For just a moment, her lips curved. Not a full smile, but a betraying smirk before she caught herself and smoothed her expression back into caution. Derek caught it anyway. His grin widened. "Look," he said, lowering his voice softer now. "I really am sorry. I'm a traveler, nothing more. Camps like this, I pass by them all the time. Didn't mean to worry you. If you'd rather, I'll get out of your hair and keep moving." She hesitated, her tail stilled, ears flicking as though she were weighing something unseen. Her gaze slid from him to the fire, then back again. "I should send you away," she murmured. "You could," Derek agreed, shrugging. "Wouldn't hold it against you." Another silence. The snow hissed as it touched the fire's embers. Then, to his surprise, her voice changed. Less guarded, more steady. "Stay," she said. "I was about to make a meal. You can share it." Derek blinked, then chuckled softly. "Well, if you're sure. I won't say no to a hot meal." She nodded once, stepping past him to kneel at the fire. Her hands moved deftly, adding dry wood from her bundle, coaxing the flames back to life. The glow touched her hair, painting it like burning embers. Derek crouched nearby, careful not to sit too close. "Name's Derek," he offered. She glanced at him as though debating whether to return the courtesy. Finally, she said, Kayla. The fire crackled, smoke spiraling upward. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was cautious, but not hostile. Two wanderers, bound by nothing, yet suddenly no longer alone. The fire caught quickly under Kayla's careful touch, flames dancing to life as though eager to please her. She moved with the efficiency of someone used to the wilderness, carving strips of dried meat, adding herbs from a small pouch, placing everything in a small iron pan over the fire. Derek watched, half because he was hungry, half because her rhythm was mesmerizing. Soon, a savory aroma rose, spiced and earthy. Derek inhaled deeply, eyebrows rising. Smells better than half the tavern food I've eaten in my life, he admitted. Kayla's ears flicked, her tail curling once behind her. That is not difficult, I think, she said. Deadpan. Derek laughed, shaking his head. Fair. Still smells amazing. My usual dinners out here are whatever I can skewer on a stick. That earned him the faintest smile, fleeting but real. She stirred the pan, then slid portions onto 2 wooden plates, handing him one without a word. Derek accepted it carefully like it was finer than any feast. He took one bite and froze. Stars above. He muttered around the mouthful. That's incredible. Kayla's golden eyes narrowed as if searching for a lie. But when he dove back in for another bite without hesitation, she looked away and a small, almost hidden curve of her lips betrayed her. You flatter easily, she said softly. He shook his head. No flattery. I mean it. You just ruined me for trail rations forever. That made her chuckle, a sound warm and unguarded. Derek grinned at the sound, eating with gusto. They shared the meal in companionable silence at first, the crackle of fire and whisper of snowfall filling the gaps. Eventually, Derek leaned back, exhaling. So, he said, you always cook like this for strangers who wander into your camp. Kayla glanced at him over her plate. Only the ones who apologize properly. He barked a laugh. Guess I passed the test then. She tilted her head. For now. There was a spark there, playful, but measured. Derek respected it. He nodded toward the treeling. Truth be told, I'm not much for sticking around anywhere. I keep moving. Eat what I find. Sleep where I can. Life's quieter that way. Kayla considered him a moment, then nodded slowly. You avoid the noise. The weight of other people pressing on you. His brow arched. That's one way to put it. And you? Her gaze softened, the firelight catching in her eyes. I left my pack. They settle for long winters. Build dens, grow roots. I cannot. I like the road, the wind, the unknown. Derek's grin spread. Now that sounds familiar. For the first time, her tail gave a slow, idle sway. She studied him like she wasn't sure whether to be amused or suspicious. Then she smirked. So, you and I are alike. Guess so, he said. Just a shame I don't have the tail to match. That made her laugh. A sharp, genuine laugh. Derek found himself chuckling too, the warmth between them growing naturally. He noticed the tail then. Thick, fiery, tipped in snow white. It swayed lazily, catching the firelight. Without realizing it, his eyes lingered. Kayla caught it instantly. Her smirk returned sharper this time. Do you like what you see, human? Derek blinked, caught red-handed. He threw his hands up. Guilty. Sorry. Never met a Vulpine before. Heard stories, sure, but never thought I'd see one up close. Her ears twitched, but she didn't seem offended. If anything, her curiosity sharpened. I have spoken to only a few humans. Traders mostly. Brief, functional. Her tail flicked once deliberately as though testing him. Does it alarm you? Derek laughed, shaking his head. Not at all. Honestly, I think it's pretty. He swore he saw color rise faintly along her cheeks. But she turned back to the fire before he could be sure. The rest of the meal passed in a quiet rhythm, the edges of their caution softening. Eventually, the fire settled into glowing coals, and they leaned back in the snow's hush, letting food and warmth sink in. The moon had risen high, silver spilling across the clearing. Derek hesitated, then cleared his throat. So earlier when I showed up, you asked if I was a hunter. At the word, her ears pricked sharp. She turned golden eyes steady. Derek hesitated again, then pushed. Surely you meant they might mistake you for a fox at first glance. Something like that. Her expression hardened. She shook her head slowly. No, they hunt me. Vulpine. Disgust coiled in his gut, rising hot and bitter. He didn't hide it. His face twisted, jaw tightening. Kayla noticed. She always noticed. Why trust me then? He asked, voice low. if that's what you risk. Her tail swayed once slow. She looked directly at him as though the fire between them had burned away all her hesitation. Because, she said softly, your scent was different. Derek blinked. Then, almost despite himself, he let out a laugh. So it's true. You can really smell me like that. Guess I must stink worse than I thought. For the first time all night, Kayla laughed fully. The sound like snow breaking from a branch. You do not smell bad. Her smile softened. You smell safe. She paused, voice dropping further and different. The words hung between them in the firelight, warmer than the flames themselves. The fire's glow sank lower as the night deepened, the air turning sharper with cold. Derek stretched his legs, arms folded behind his head as he leaned against the log. He was full, warm, and oddly at peace. Kayla, on the other side of the fire, was still watching the embers, her tail curled loosely around her side like a blanket. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the forest itself had gone still to listen. At last, Derek let out a low sigh. You know, he said, this is probably the best night I've had in months. Kayla's ears flicked, but she didn't look up because of the food. He chuckled partly, but company doesn't hurt either. This time, she did glance at him quickly before returning her gaze to the fire. Her cheeks seemed faintly colored by more than just the heat of the flames. Eventually, Kayla unfurled her tail and shifted, laying her bedroll flat. Rest, she murmured. The night is safe here, Derek smirked. Safe, huh? I guess I'll trust your nose on that one. That earned him another fleeting smile. She laid down, tail tucked close, and soon her breathing slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. Derek lingered a while longer, listening to the wind in the trees before finally letting his own eyes close. When dawn came, pale light filtered through the canopy, carrying the chill of morning frost. Derek stirred, blinking blurrily at the gray sky before pushing himself up. Across the fire pit, Kayla was already awake, brushing snow from her cloak. You rise with the sun, she noted. Not quite a question. He grinned, rubbing his hands together. Can't waste daylight. Besides, beats waking up to a landlord pounding on your door. Kayla tilted her head. I've never had a landlord. Lucky you, Derek said. He stood, slinging his pack over one shoulder. So what's your plan today? She adjusted her furs, thoughtful. Keep moving. I head north. Fewer people there. Derek nodded, chewing the inside of his cheek. Then he shrugged. Mind if I tag along? Figure. Why not? Beats wandering alone. Kayla blinked at him. Her ears swiveled once, tail giving a small twitch. You want to travel with me? Sure, he said lightly. I owe you at least. Next meal's on me. His grin widened. Though I'll warn you now, it won't taste half as good as yours. To his relief, Kayla let out a soft laugh, genuine enough that her tail gave a pleased flick. We'll see, she said. And just like that, they fell into step. The day tested them in little ways, as the wilderness always did. They crossed a half-frozen stream first, Derek hopping stone to stone while Kayla padded lightly across the slick surface. Tail out for balance. Derek slipped once, boots skidding on wet stone. He cursed, windmilling his arms before catching himself. Kayla stifled a laugh. Graceful. Hey, he shot back, grinning. You've got 4 legs worth of practice built in. Unfair advantage. 4, she echoed, amused. Well, 2 plus the tail, he said. That thing's basically a third arm. Her ears twitched, and she smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. Later, when they pushed through a thicket of brambles, Derek grabbed the thorny branches to hold them aside so Kayla could slip through first. She gave him a curious look as she passed. Polite, she said dryly. He winked. Don't tell anyone. You'll ruin my rugged image. That earned him another small laugh, the sound quick but bright. By midday, they found a patch of open ground where the snow had melted thin. Derek dug into his pack, pulling out dried venison and a battering pot. He glanced at her sheepishly. Like I said, don't expect much. Kayla knelt beside him, watching as he clumsily arranged the meat with wild roots he'd foraged earlier. The result was hardly elegant, but when he set the pot over a small fire, the smell was hearty and comforting. She tasted it carefully, tilting her head. It is edible, she judged at last, though her lips twitched with suppressed amusement. Derek snorted. I'll take that as high praise coming from you. Her smirk softened into something warmer. It is not bad, Derek. Honest, he raised an eyebrow. Was that flattery? Perhaps, she said, tail flicking once behind her. They ate, laughed, and kept moving, falling into an easy rhythm. Each small challenge, a slippery slope, a patch of tangled brush, even just spotting tracks in the snow, they handled together, often with a joke or a quip exchanged in passing. The land was harsh, but for once neither of them felt it pressing too heavily. By the time the sun began to sink, the idea of traveling together no longer felt strange. It felt natural. Kayla walked beside him in silence for a while, her ears twitching as if listening to something deeper in the woods. Then she spoke quietly. "You travel well," she said. Derek smirked. "Thanks. You're not so bad yourself." For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but the spark of trust being kindled. Companionship. The forest closed around them again, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. The days that followed fell into an easy rhythm. They walked the snowy trails side by side, sometimes talking, sometimes simply listening to the crunch of their boots and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Kayla was sharp-eyed, catching details in the wilderness. Derek sometimes missed broken branches, faint paw prints, the telltale scent of something on the wind. He admired her instinct. She in turn watched how he worked with his hands, patching torn straps, setting traps, improvising with the land itself. Where her senses failed, his stubborn practicality filled the gap. It worked. Together they worked. But 3 days in, the weather turned. It started with a low howl on the wind, rising steadily into a keening cry through the treetops. By midday, snow fell so thick it swallowed the forest, blinding in every direction. The temperature plummeted. Derek pulled his cloak tighter, leaning into the wind. "Storm's coming fast," he shouted over the gusts. Kayla's ears pressed flat against her skull, her tail whipping in the gale. "We need shelter." They pushed onward until at last Derek spotted a rocky outcrop jutting from the hillside. A dark hollow at its base promised some reprieve from the storm. They scrambled down, sliding into the small cave just as the blizzard slammed in full force. Inside, it was cramped but dry. Their breath misted in the cold air, the sound of the storm a dull roar outside. Both of them were soaked, their clothes heavy, hair clinging in damp strands. Kayla's tail drooped pitifully, weighed down with melted snow, and her ears sagged flat against her head. Derek couldn't help himself. A laugh escaped him. "You look miserable." Kayla shot him a glare, but it lacked real heat. "It is not funny." "It's a little funny," he insisted, grinning. "Tail looks like a drowned mop." That earned him a sharp huff, but her mouth twitched at the corner, betraying her. "Careful, human. I may not share my food next time." "Fair trade," he teased back, wringing water from his cloak. "Long as you don't bite me with those sharp teeth." Her smirk widened, the tension easing between them even as the storm raged outside. The cold, however, crept in quickly. Derek rubbed his hands together, frowning. "We'll freeze if we don't do something." Firewood soaked. No chance of a blaze. Kayla nodded grimly. "We share warmth. Body heat." He didn't argue. He knew she was right. They spread their damp cloaks against the rocky wall and sat close, shoulders brushing, each of them tucking limbs in tight. Kayla's tail wrapped around them both like a blanket, its wet chilly at first, but warming quickly under their shared body heat. The closeness was unexpected. Derek could feel the steady rise and fall of her breath, the faint brush of her hair against his jaw whenever she shifted. At first, it was survival, nothing more. But as the hours dragged, he noticed her lingering just a little closer than necessary. Once, when he turned to glance at her, he caught her golden eyes fixed on him. She startled, ears twitching, and looked away too quickly. He chuckled softly. "Caught you." Her tail flicked. "You imagine things? Must be the cold making me hallucinate." She elbowed him lightly in the ribs, and he grinned at the spark of playfulness returning. Still, he couldn't ignore it. The subtle glances, the way her laughter came easier now, warmer despite the storm outside. They passed the time with small talk and banter, voices low, sharing stories of the road. Derek told of a time he tried to fish through eyes too thin and ended up soaked to the bone for his trouble. Kayla laughed, covering her mouth with her hand as though she wasn't supposed to. When she countered with her own story, a night she had mistaken a porcupine for a boar and nearly grabbed it. Derek laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. The storm howled, but in the cave there was laughter, warmth, and something else, too. Something Derek couldn't quite name, but he could feel it. A shift. Kayla leaned her head back against the stone wall, her ears twitching, lazily eyes half-lit. She looked comfortable, safer maybe, than she had in days. Derek stole another glance at her, noticing again how her gaze lingered on him now and then, before darting away. Her tail, once drooping and heavy, now curled loosely around them both, brushing against his leg as though it had claimed the space for its own. The storm outside raged on, uncaring. But inside that little hollow, something had begun to change. And Derek, though he laughed and joked, as always, knew it. The storm didn't pass quickly. It howled on into the night, then into the next day. Snow piling so high at the cave mouth that daylight entered only as a muted glow. The wind never relented, rattling the trees above like dry bones. Derek and Kayla stayed close, sharing warmth. They took turns dozing, keeping each other company through the hours. He'd been through storms before, many of them worse, but never like this. Never was someone at his side. As the days dragged, he began to notice things, small things he hadn't before. The way her ears perked when he spoke, angling unconsciously toward his voice. The fluid grace in her movements, even when confined to their cramped shelter. The flick of her tail when she was amused. The way her golden eyes glowed softly in the firelight. Derek told himself it was just a cabin fever of being stuck here together. Nothing more. But the longer he looked, the harder it became to ignore. Kayla wasn't just another traveler. She was beautiful, wild and otherworldly, yes, but in a way that made something in his chest stir. And it wasn't just him. More than once, he caught her looking. Quick glances when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Sometimes longer. Her eyes drifting across his face, his hands lingering just a little too long. Always followed by a sudden shift away as if nothing had happened. By the second night, it was impossible to pretend he hadn't noticed. Derek was in the middle of recounting an old story. How he once got lost for a week in the highlands after following the wrong trail. When he felt her gaze again, he trailed off, turning his head. Sure enough, Kayla was watching him, her expression unguarded, golden eyes focused wholly on him. When their eyes met, she froze, ears snapping upright. Her face flushed a sudden, brilliant red, and she jerked her gaze to the floor. Derek couldn't help it. He chuckled. Kayla stiffened. "I'm sorry," she blurted. He tilted his head. "Sorry. What for?" She fumbled, her words tumbling over themselves. "I wasn't. I didn't mean to. I was just, hey." He interrupted gently, voice calm. "It's fine, really." She finally looked back at him, her expression torn between embarrassment and something else. The firelight flickered in her eyes. Derek gave her a small, reassuring smile, and slowly she exhaled, a long, shaky sigh. Her tail twitched uncertainly, curling tighter around them both. She hesitated, then said almost too quietly to hear, "Your smell." Derek blinked. "My what?" Kayla's face went scarlet. She sat up straighter, ears flat against her head, her whole body stiff with mortification. "Forget I said that." Derek frowned, baffled. "Wait, what do you mean?" She buried her face in her hands, muttering through her fingers. "I shouldn't have said anything." "Kayla," he said softly, leaning toward her, trying to catch her eye. "What do you mean?" Her hands dropped, and though she looked like she wanted to disappear into the stone wall behind her, she forced the words out. "Your smell is intoxicating." The cave fell silent except for the storm's howl. Derek stared at her, utterly lost. "Intoxicating," he echoed, brow furrowed. She squeezed her eyes shut as if bracing for ridicule, her tail wrapped tight around her body now, as though trying to shield her from her own admission. Derek sat frozen, his heart thudding in his chest. Of all the things he thought she might say, that wasn't one of them. For once, he had no joke ready. No easy answer, just the sound of her breathing, quick and uneven, and the steady roar of the blizzard outside. Something had shifted, and there was no turning it back. Derek sat frozen, her words echoing in the small cave, intoxicating. Of all the things to hear, it rattled through his head, leaving him grasping for sense. Finally, he found his voice, though it cracked a little. "Wait, so what you're saying is I stink so bad it's messing with your head?" Kayla's eyes widened, horrified. "No," she blurted, shaking her head so fast her damp hair whipped about her face. "Not like that. Not the smell you think." Derek blinked, still at sea. "Then what?" She bit her lip, looking anywhere but at him. "It is different." Deeper, not sweat, not dirt. It is the part of you you cannot hide. He stared, brown knitting until the idea struck him. Wait, he said slowly. You mean pheromones? His tone hovered between curiosity and disbelief. You can smell that. Kayla's cheeks went crimson. She gave the smallest nod, ears low, tail curling tighter around herself. Her voice was a whisper. It is very strong with you, especially when we are so close. For a heartbeat, Derek's mind went blank. Then all at once, everything crashed in. The moments his thoughts had wandered to her. Her movements, her beauty, the way his chest tightened when she smiled. Heat spread across his face. Wait, he muttered, horrified realization dawning. You mean you could smell? Kayla tilted her head, uncertain, but that was enough. Derek clapped his hands over his face, mortified. Oh hell, Kayla. Damn it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to. He stammered, words tumbling as though apologies could smother the truth of his thoughts. Derek, she interrupted softly. He peeked between his fingers, and the sight stopped him cold. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disgusted. She was blushing harder than ever, but her eyes were warm, vulnerable. I feel it, too, she admitted. The words seemed to cost her, but once spoken, they hung in the air between them, undeniable. Derek slowly lowered his hands, his breath catching. You do? Kayla nodded once, ears trembling. Vulpine, we find our mates through scent. It tells us more than sight or sound. It tells us who belongs. Her gaze dropped, voice faltering. Since we met, it has been pulling at me. My body longs for you, even when my mind resists. Derek's heart hammered against his ribs. For a moment, he couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Kayla wrapped her arms around herself as though bracing against his rejection. I should not have said it, but I could not hold it anymore. Her tail twitched, restless and uncertain. The storm raged on outside, but here in the narrow cave, the world had narrowed to two travelers who had stumbled into something neither of them expected. Derek's mouth went dry. Attraction, raw and undeniable, had been simmering in him for days. Now, knowing she felt it, too, it threatened to spill over. But in Kayla's voice, in the tremor of her words, he heard something else. Fear, not of him, but of being too honest, too vulnerable. He swallowed hard, pulse still racing. Kayla. Her name left his lips differently this time. Softer. She looked up, golden eyes luminous in the fire's glow. And for once, Derek didn't joke, didn't deflect. He simply held her gaze. The storm and the cold forgotten. The cave was still, save for the storm's muffled roar beyond its mouth. Derek's chest rose and fell sharply. His heartbeat, so loud he swore Kayla could hear it. Her words still lingered, thick in the air between them. My body longs for you. He wasn't sure which of them moved first. Maybe it was both, as if the tension finally snapped like an overdrawn boring. One moment they were staring, uncertain and raw. The next, Kayla had shifted closer, her tail brushing against his leg in a hesitant, almost searching gesture. Derek exhaled shakily, Kayla. Her ears twitched at the sound of her name. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned forward, the firelight catching the faint tremor of her lips. They stopped inches apart, both of them frozen, waiting. Derek lifted a hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull back. His fingertips brushed her cheek, warm against the flesh there. Her eyes fluttered shut, but she didn't move away. That was all the answer he needed. Their foreheads touched first, a quiet meeting that made the storm fade into nothing. Then, softly, their lips met. It wasn't urgent. Not yet. It was tentative, like two wanderers testing a bridge they never dared cross before. But the warmth of it spread through him faster than any fire, and the way she sighed against his mouth sent a shiver down his spine. When they parted, her breath was unsteady. Her golden eyes searched his face wide and uncertain. Derek, she whispered. I don't. I've never. He shook his head gently. Me either. Not like this. For a heartbeat, silence fell again. Then she leaned into him fully, pressing herself against his chest, her tail curling around them both. Derek wrapped his arms around her instinctively, pulling her close, feeling the heat of her body despite the damp fur and cold air. They stayed like that, simply holding each other, the intimacy of the moment more powerful than any words. Derek found himself burying his face against her hair, inhaling that wild, earthy scent of pine and smoke that clung to her. She had been right. There was something deeper there, something that tugged at him in ways he couldn't name. Kayla shifted slightly, lifting her head to look at him again. Her face was still flushed, but there was no hiding the softness in her gaze now. She let out a shaky laugh. So this is what it feels like. Derek smiled faintly. What does two belong? The words hit him harder than he expected. He brushed his thumb along her jaw, answering softly. Guess that makes two of us. They leaned together again. Another kiss, longer this time, deeper, filled with all the unspoken things that had built between them over days of travel, nights of laughter, and this storm that had trapped them close. Outside, the blizzard raged. But inside, in their cramped shelter, the storm seemed a world away. Eventually, they eased apart, still wrapped in each other's arms. Kayla's tail coiled around his leg, refusing to let go, and Derek chuckled at the possessive gesture. Not planning on letting me go, are you? Her cheeks burned hotter, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she buried her face against his chest and murmured, No. Derek's smile softened. He held her tighter, resting his chin atop her head. Good, he whispered. They sat together in silence, listening not to the storm, but to the steady rhythm of each other's breathing. The world outside could howl and freeze as much as it wanted. Here, in the warmth of each other, they had found something stronger. The storm would end eventually. But Derek knew as he closed his eyes with Kayla nestled against him, that whatever came next, he wasn't walking the road alone anymore. When dawn finally broke, it came with a thin band of pale light pushing through the storm clouds. The wind had quieted to little more than a restless whisper, and the snowfall outside had slowed to a lazy drift. Derek blinked awake to the sound of silence. Not the hollow silence of isolation, but something softer. The hush that follows after fury has burned itself out. He shifted slightly, realizing only then that Kayla was still curled against him. Her tail draped across his lap, her breath slow and even. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just watched her sleep, her ears twitching faintly with dreams, the faintest rise and fall of her chest against him. Something warm stirred in him again, but it wasn't the wild rush from before. It was quieter, heavier. Belonging, he thought, recalling her words. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. When she finally starred, blinking golden eyes open, she caught him looking. Her ears flicked upright, then lowered shyly. You were staring? Derek smirked, voice low and growly with sleep. Caught me. Guess I'll have to plead guilty again. Her lips twitched, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she sat up slowly, stretching her arms until her joints popped. The storm's remnants groaned outside the cave mouth, and she turned toward it with a quiet sigh. It has passed. Together, they packed what little they had laid out. Derek slung his gear over his shoulder, while Kayla shook out her damp furs. The fur along her ears and tail fluffed back to life now that they were no longer weighed down with ice. When they stepped out, the world beyond was transformed. Snow blanketed everything in a thick, pristine layer, glittering under the weak winter sun. Branches bowed heavy under the weight. The forest hushed in reverent stillness. Their footprints were the first to mark the untouched ground. Derek whistled low. Guess we've got the whole world to ourselves, huh? Kayla's ears angled toward him, then back to the horizon. It feels clean, she said softly, like starting over. They walked in silence for a while, the crunch of fresh snow beneath their boots the only sound. Eventually, Derek glanced at her sidelong, a crooked grin on his lips. So, about that deal. I don't know if that last meal was really up to standard. Her tail flicked once playfully. Then you will just have to keep trying until it is better. He laughed, shaking his head. Guess I've signed myself up for a lifetime of bad reviews. Perhaps, she said, her smirk betraying the warmth behind the words. The rhythm of their banter came easily, but beneath it ran a new current. Derek could feel it in the way her shoulder brushed his when the path narrowed, or how her tail seemed to swish just a little closer than before. And every so often, when he caught her looking at him again, she didn't always look away immediately. By midday, they stopped to rest near a frozen creek. Derek crouched to crack the ice for water while Kayla knelt nearby, her eyes tracing the snowy horizon. He glanced at her, then asked casually, So where to now? Kayla tilted her head, considering north perhaps, or west. It does not matter. He raised a brow. Doesn't matter. She looked at him then, her expression steady. Because the road is less important than the one walking beside me. Derek froze, stunned by the simple honesty of it. He tried to cover with a grin, but it came out softer than usual. Guess that makes my answer easy then. Caleb blinked. And that is wherever you're headed, he said, shouldering his pack again. Why not? Her ears twitched, and for a brief shining moment, she smiled. Truly smiled without hesitation. It was the kind of smile that lit her entire face that warmed him more than any fire. The day stretched on, the snow crunching beneath their steps as they carved a new trail through the wilderness together. Derek didn't know where the road would lead or how far, but he knew this much. He wasn't walking it alone anymore, not with Kayla at his side. And for the first time in years, the path ahead didn't feel endless. It felt like a beginning. By the time the sun dipped low, the world had shifted from blinding white to soft gold. The snow fields glowed in the fading light, the trees casting long, dark shadows across the ground. The storm was behind them now, just a memory trailing in their footsteps. Derek and Kayla found a small rise at the edge of a clearing, sheltered by a thicket of firs. The snow was thinner here, and with practice ease they scraped it away, laying stones and kindling until a small fire crackled between them. Derek leaned back against his pack, stretching his legs with a tired sigh. Well, he said, eyeing the flames. Here's to surviving blizzards and bad jokes. Kayla tilted her head, her tail curling neatly around her. Your jokes are not bad, she said simply. He raised a brow. Not bad, not bad, she repeated, though the corner of her mouth tugged upward, giving away the tease in her tone. He chuckled, shaking his head. Careful, I might start thinking you actually like me. Kayla's ears flicked, and for a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, she looked into the fire, the flames painting her face in warm hues. Then she said quietly, I would not be here if I did not. The words landed heavier than he expected. Derek's chest tightened, but not in the awkward way it had before. This time it felt right. He reached for a stick, prodding the fire, trying to mask the weight of his own smile. Guess that makes two of us then. They ate a simple meal, dried meat, roasted roots, snow melt boiled into tea. It wasn't much, but together it felt better than any feast. Derek found himself laughing more easily, and Kayla, though reserved by habit, laughed, too. It was softer than his, but no less real. When the food was gone and the fire had burned low, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the night. The storm's fury was a world away now. Above them, the sky stretched clear and endless, stars sharp as diamonds against the dark. Kayla leaned back on her hands, tilting her head skyward. Her ears twitched as if catching the whispers of the night wind. It is beautiful, she murmured. Derek followed her gaze. Yeah, never gets old, does it? Not when shared, she said. That gave him pause. He turned, watching her instead of the stars. Her profile was lit by moonlight, delicate and strong all at once, her tail flicking slowly in the snow. For a man who had spent his life wandering without ties, without roots, the sight stirred something he hadn't known he was missing. Kayla, he said, voice softer than he meant it to be. She looked at him, golden eyes meeting his. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. Glad I stumbled into your camp that night. Her lips curved, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. So am I. The fire crackled low. Their shoulders brushed. Not by accident this time. Kayla's tail curled, brushing against his side before coiling there, warm and certain. Derek let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and leaned gently against her. Either of them spoke after that. They didn't need to. The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to a bond that had only just begun to take shape. The road ahead would be long. There would be storms, hunger, endless miles of untamed land. But for the first time in his life, Derek didn't think about the hardship. He thought about the sound of Kayla's laugh, the warmth of her beside him, and the way the night felt less empty with her there. As he drifted towards sleep, her voice brushed the quiet. Derek, yeah, tomorrow. Where will we go? He smiled into the dark. Doesn't matter long as we go together. Kayla's tail tightened around him, and her soft laugh was the last thing he heard before the fire sank to embers and the stars wheeled on. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more Foxgirl and HFY romance tales every day. Until next time, keep wondering and keep believing in the bond that makes us human.